Well, let me go a little bit back, and this is going to show the evolution of the topic itself. So I started first at the IMF in 2001, and at that time we used to have brown bag lunches as women, okay, to see how we can encourage each other to do internal mobility. And these were individual efforts. There was no mainstream in the institution to actually bring the topic to the fore. This has changed tremendously. The IMF was the institution that always does, still does, financial policy, monetary policy, etc. But to have in 2015 a paper come out and quantify how women's participation in economies adds to GDP, that was a breakthrough for the IMF. And the term that was used, women participation, is macro-critical. And this opens the door to, in the design of programs with the IMF, etc., you always put a gender element. So I think that in all institutions, the women element has actually progressed. It progressed in a way where it's no longer just lip service or a statistic that needs to increase, but the quantification of the matter has added a lot of importance, has added a lot of guidance in policy work, in private sector engagement, etc. So I think not just in the region, but globally, women issues are important and have been at the priority of many institutions.
You're a trained economist. The numbers I was talking about before, I think, are extraordinary, how much you could unleash in an economy, which is quite mature in many markets around the world. So you're looking for new areas of growth. This is so obvious and in front of us that you could empower people even with fiscal policies. Do you want to address that quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it's to have equal pay, to have women in leadership roles, to allow access when it comes to whether it's transportation, daycare, close to, like when we had the IMF program in Egypt between 2016 and 2019, there was an element where the government had to allow for daycares to basically encourage more women participation. In Egypt, there are around 48 million women. 23 million are actually supporting families, so 14% of families in Egypt are supported by women. And what the government is trying to do is to allow better access to financing, to allow more inclusion when it comes to banks, when it comes to access to credit, basically to unleash, exactly as you say. We have a national strategy which is outlined by the National Council for Women, comes under the president. On the political side, 8 cabinet members are female, that's 25%, and then we have more than 19% in parliament. So things are progressing. There's political empowerment, economic empowerment through these different targets when it comes to access to finance. There's the social empowerment where you're trying to also change the societal idea about women's participation. I just want to say one thing on women in government, since the panel is about that. Any one of us in government as a woman, we have 2 tasks. One is to prove yourself in whatever portfolio you are leading, but then you also open the door for other women if you do a good job.
Right.
And that is extremely important, if you do a good job, societal perception changes. They become also gender blind. She did a good job, he did a good job, whoever's competent can be there. And also it gives political leadership more strength when, and more argument when they
push it again.
To push it again.
Okay, great. So one quick question for you, Rania, is that what are the laws and legislation and the educational legislation that's going into place in Egypt to say, you know, we need these skills from women in the future in our economy, and it's a large economy?
Okay, so technology is an undeniable fact today. Everybody knows that with artificial intelligence, etc., so many jobs will be displaced, but also new jobs created. So the idea is to equip, particularly the women are going to be the first displaced, to equip them with the skill sets and the vocational training that can actually allow them to re-engage again in society. So the buzzword today is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And as governments, we have to be very mindful of that.
In fact, that's been a conversation for 5 years. Has that conversation infiltrated into policy, would you say?
Yes. For example, when it comes to the different institutions that are doing vocational training, there are elements of that, and particularly programs for women. We try. I think what is required in general is to elevate the narrative on what is happening, because there are many fragmented efforts, but we need to consolidate that so that you actually open up this realization that there are efforts being done. They're not finished, but they have had progress, and let's continue going. Let's continue going forward. So I think that's key. When you say what is the toolbox for being able to prove yourself or have a voice, etc., education is number one. Number two is always having role models or mentors. And I will never forget when I was leaving the IMF to go to become Minister of Tourism. The MD at the time, Christine Lagarde, sent me a very nice email with 10 points, which were what happened to her when she was a minister in France. And she said, you know, you're not going to understand all of these 10 commandments now, but they're going to come very handy. And it's impressive that every one of us basically provides insight to others. Something else which is very important, because the generations in the region are young, and there's always this perception, women who work and women who have positions are not very feminine. They don't have to, you know, they're very studious. But that's not correct. And basically to be able to be good and competent, but at the same time have a stardom effect, I think these are all very important messages. Social media today provides us with means to communicate very fast, communicate rigorously, and I think we need to use these tools to encourage more women, as you mentioned, to inspire, to lead, to dream that you can do it and you can be there, and you should not be intimidated by circumstances.
You know, it's funny, you say social media, you're being extremely modest because you have a big following, but every time we do an interview together, I go in and look at the comments, but I love the fact that the men weigh in and like, gosh, she makes us proud. Oh my God, we have this woman. She's trailblazing. But I would think those comments would come from women kind of instinctually in Egypt. But it's the men that show the backing for you, which I think is impressive in a sector, particularly in tourism, which was unheard of. Right?
I think I was raised to be gender blind, so I don't see man, woman. I never wanted to be labeled as the only woman in the room, but the best person in the room, or a competent person in the room. And I think this is a feeling which is important. People want to see success and be part of it. And when you are able to, yesterday we had this session at the beginning about intentional leadership. You go in with an intention to do well. You are authentic with your message. You are present in every moment. You just do your best. And I think you know, the reactions I get on social media from the many followers just creates a lot of energy. It adds bigger responsibility. I feel each one of them is someone I know, even though I don't know them. And every time I post something, I feel it's as if I'm going on Broadway, you know, and the curtains open up. So I thank them for all the, really, the energy that they provide in doing my job. I'm a policymaker. I love policy work. I feel governments set a tone and invite and include multilaterals, private sector, etc. So I'm very happy that on the women issue, there's a framework. It's a global framework, and we're getting better at it. In the past, we used to shy as women talking about women issues. Now, that's not the case. It's not an afterthought. It's not a residual. It's mainstream. And this is very, very important. It sets dialogue. It creates a meaning to the policy work, because quantification is key. And this has happened whenever a policy is changing, whether legislation, whether in cabinet, etc. You are able to make a family happier and more hopeful. More income.
That's the best weapon, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I think that's the way you can actually go again. Fend off populism, because everyone wants to be hopeful, everyone wants to be happy, and this is what governments should be set out to do, with partnerships with private sector, civil society, and international institutions.